This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
It's rather rare for an Indian politician to have hands-on political experience as Defence Minister, External Affairs Minister and Finance Minister. Senior BJP leader Jaswant Singh has worn all three hats. No surprise then that his political memoirs, his life's memoirs in fact, are attracting the kind of attention and controversy that they are. Welcome to NDTV.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
The first question that seems to follow any biography of any kind is how honest the author has managed to be, how truthful he has managed to be about his own life, especially when a politician pens what's happened in his life. Do you believe in some ways that you have been absolutely blunt and truthful about all your political experiences?
But I think if you're blunt and truthful, they don't necessarily go together. Besides, this is not totally an autobiography.
Did you hold back? Because several of the people, the experiences you write about are people still in politics, some still in government, certainly all authorities of power in contemporary politics.
I don't think I've deliberately back that which is central to the purpose of the book that I'm writing. But one doesn't have to, and one can't, because I continue to be under obligations of secrecy, oaths, a variety of things. And you don't necessarily write to hurt anybody.
Whether you wanted it to be this way or not, the primary focus of this book has become what happened at Kandahar. It's the way journalists, at least, and a lot of ordinary readers will react to it. And I was going through your book, I was up reading it all night, and you described that event as your most trying and searing experience. And you went on to write, how in governance do you choose between two equally valid moral rights? Now, what struck me, Mr. Singh, was that you don't actually seem to have resolved that internal conflict, that moral dilemma for yourself. At least the book doesn't tell us if you did. Looking back, do you think it was a mistake? Is it something that you continue to regret?
No, I don't think it was a mistake at all, Barkha, not at all. Because the choice was between life and death. Secondly, you suggested, have you resolved it? I don't think this is the sort of question that can be resolved. You can't resolve such great dilemmas of decision-making. Thirdly, I have only sketched the atmosphere that then prevailed about our citizens rolling on the ground. I have not cited all the newspaper cuttings of those years. You must understand that when a challenge of such enormity faces the country, the choice between 166 knowingly to be killed because of what you say, what you decide, yes or no. And this whole business of human ransom exchange is not an easy business. Hindsight with which you judge, I don't mean you.
History.
Or commentators, is always 20/20. Decision-making is instantaneous. You must also understand that unlike common perceptions, governments have to act, all governments, whether Indian or American, all governments have to act in relative absence of information. That is the reality. I could not afford to take on the responsibility of 166 innocent. Why? Their lives. But I couldn't take it on. Secondly, the whole nation has to go through this turmoil. The nation has to feel the pain.
And the conflict.
And the nation has to suffer it. And thereafter, for the nation alone can decide we will give her 166. I don't think any one government can decide this.
But so what turned it? Because when I was reading the book, you actually describe a cabinet meeting where the demands made by the hijackers are discussed by the government. The cabinet, you write, unanimously decides that those demands have to be rejected. They tell you to go out and meet the press and say that. But you go out and you say the whole nation has to reflect on this. And then ultimately you concede by you, not just personally, the government, India concedes to some of these demands. What turned that decision when the cabinet had decided not to do this?
I'll tell you. Now, you said two things. In fact, if you go through the press statements, plus the statements that I made in Parliament on 28 February 2000, this is quite explicit. I had to shake. You must recognize this is the period following upon Christmas. If I'd said I reject, I might be instrumental in the killing of the 166 straight away. Yeah. This is actually the, if I'm not mistaken, 28th or 29th of December. I have to play the rope a bit. I have to see where I get. And this did work. My statement to the press generated such enormous revulsion in the international community. But more than that, the most important, it created a revulsion in the Islamic world, because those were the period of Ramadan. More than that, I know that, I don't want to name them, certain governments then leaned very heavily on Mullah Umar and persuaded him that you must force the hijackers to drop these demands. So my ploy worked. They dropped 200 million. There was no question of paying 200 million in any case.
So 200 million, no ransom money was paid?
But of course not a penny.
And the 36 release became
on
free?
36, we negotiated, because I had to whittle it down. Now, I don't want to go into the details of how we negotiated, how we played it around. In any case, the third demand was for the bones of terrorists that had got killed while digging a tunnel in the jail by the name of Afghani, and his remains were needed, which again, the Islamic countries said is un-Islamic, don't. So 2 are out, 36 remains. That the Islamic nation did not lead. I wanted I had no tools with which to fight. I was fighting with what I had. And so I used the international community diplomatically as best as I could. Then when it came to 36-3, finally I got in rather concerned and somewhat, if I might use the word, because my officers worked with great diligence. I saw how they were staying, 3 of them, senior officers, sharing a little hovel of a CPWD kind of 3 of them in the same room with one bathroom, and a plywood separation, next to which are the ISI listeners. Every word of what they say is being snooped. And then they came and said, sir, this is the final. They have come down to 3. We have managed to beat them down to 3.
And no ransom money?
No, of course no ransom money. We have beaten them down to 3. Now it is getting desperate. This is already the 31st. It was already by then about 1:32 in the afternoon, Indian Standard Time. Time was running out. Because they said on the night of 31st, if we don't, this plane is going to be blown up. How do you decide? Not easy. It's very easy now.
To think about whether it was right or wrong. Yes. You know, I remember meeting you at the airport. I got into the airport somehow and I begged
No, you got in through some...
food van. Through the food van.
The usual maneuvers. Methods.
And I remember begging you to take me with you, and of course you couldn't. But reading your book, I get some sense of that anguish. Yet in your evaluation of that moment, of that very morally ambivalent choice that you had to make, you still believe that it was not a mistake. Yet would you say that when the BJP today talks about the UPA being soft on terror, this is the one episode that will come back to haunt not just you, but your party?
I don't think so. I don't think, you see, I'm giving, because I'm honestly, you asked me, do you honestly share? I honestly share the torment through which I went on those days. I used to sleep on a chair next to the telephone. I don't want to go into personal things, what had happened in the family, etc.
Your granddaughter was being born, your mother was ill.
They're all part of the book.
Yeah.
Now, so many years down the line, I'm more than ever convinced that you must always stand for life, you must always save life, because the battle against terrorism does not end here, does not end with one incident. This is not a surrender. This does not diminish the BJP stand against terrorism. I don't want to cite examples of what the earlier Congress governments have done in regard to their approach to terrorism.
It's the helplessness of any government in some ways in this situation. But you know, there's some decisions in life which when you sleep at night, you can't sleep easy with them. Is Kandahar one of them? Or do you think, all things considered, there was nothing else you could have done?
Oh, absolutely. As far as Kandahar, those 166 lives, some of the faces of those young mother and others, they certainly come back to me. Their agony and you have no idea of the torment, particularly the women that went through it. Can you imagine? An encapsulated 160 plus, one toilet overflowing, 8 days.
So there's nothing else you could have done?
Nothing else. And on that, there are no regrets. And to do this from where we are negotiating in the most impossible of circumstances. Kandahar was as far as India is concerned, it was possibly the worst possible place for us to negotiate. And to get 166 safely back with the aircraft, because Prime Minister Vajpayee had earlier stated in a short statement that our priority is to get the passengers back to India safely. That we achieved that. I don't think it's an insignificant achievement. We had to pay a price, yes, but the battle against terrorism would not have ended if we had let 166 get killed. No way.
Your chapter on Kandahar actually ends with a rather cynical comment on the United States and how, well, cynical is my word, that's not the word you use, but about the joint cooperation on terrorism did not go so far as to have the United States provide India the kind of access it wanted to interrogate some of these players directly.
It's not cynical, you've said, it's not, but it is a comment that reflects my disappointment. You must understand, Barkha, that I'm a realist. I'm an adult enough to know the realities of diplomatic life. United States will cooperate to the extent that their national interest is not jeopardized. I had when, for example, when Mr. Armitage came here after President Bush's election, etc., and I had then said, I think we will now, Jaswant certainly, will now stop asking United States of America for any help when it comes, A, to Pakistan, and B, when it comes to fight against terrorism. This is not a charge. This is a recognition of a reality. You cannot do anything else but what you are doing, because your policy in Pakistan has got trapped in a cul-de-sac. You can't even turn around. It's no good for me.
So it's a self-serving policy in some ways?
Well, all policies are in that sense in service of national interest. I don't hold it. I'm not aggrieved. It's not out of pique that I write. I write that sentence only to reflect on the reality of what we are facing.
But when it comes to the United States, and this is the other part of your book that's created quite a storm, you actually suggest what's come to be known as the mole in the PMO. That phrase isn't quite there in the book put like that, but there is a controversial letter that is reproduced. You do not tell us who wrote that letter. Before I get into the contents of the letter, some would say, Mr. Singh, in 1995, you had a copy of this letter. Yeah. You had reason to believe that someone senior in the Prime Minister's office was letting somebody in America know of crucial national security information. Why did you not speak up then?
I'll tell you. Firstly, I didn't get it in 95.
Okay.
I got it later.
Several years later, or?
If I look back, I was already a deputy leader of the opposition. So it must be post-96. I didn't exactly record
when you got
when I got it, but I got it when I was already a deputy leader in the Lok Sabha. Then I read it at length, and I found that the personages that were mentioned there are no longer on the scene.
They were no longer part of policy making.
No, absolutely not. Thirdly, then I reflected on the political reality of the then government of India, and we were rapidly transiting from one to another government. And I thought, now in retrospect, to have a kind of a witch hunt would serve nobody's purpose. And then I reflected on it a great deal. Even the American who had written, this is not written by an Indian.
It's an American diplomat.
I won't say who it is, but it's written by an American, clearly. And he himself also doesn't name the Indian that is there. But I have just heard yesterday, I think, that the Honorable Prime Minister has
asked you to name the person if you have the courage or the decency, in his words.
But that's rather a big...
It's a big accusation to say there's a mole in the Prime Minister's office as well.
I didn't say there's a mole. I used a part of that letter to suggest that the United States of America was wrong in charging India of... they were charging India of saying, you did not tell us the truth. Madeleine and Manila said, Jaswant, you lied to us. If it were not so utterly ridiculous, I would have found it...
funny or annoying.
I would have found it insulting.
Yes.
I cite this, and only a portion of it, to caution our citizens, everybody.
So why not name the person?
No, so I will now, when the Prime Minister... I don't think it's really a question.
I mean, the Prime Minister has virtually dared you as if to suggest that this is not true. So why not name the person? Because it does involve national security.
I'll tell you, firstly, I'm not given to indecent exposures.
This is a teaser. It's sort of short of the indecent exposure.
And secondly, I really wish, I don't think prime ministers, I don't wish to say anything about the good doctor, but I don't think prime ministers ought to be throwing challenges in the language of wrestling matches.
But will you be naming the person?
No, I will not name the person, but I shall certainly go and give to the Prime Minister, when he gives me the time, all information that I have.
Is this a person who can still affect policy?
No, it can't, not at all.
Did he affect policy at the time you got the letter? Is it a bureaucrat, a politician?
The name is, the person is not named, but it's for the Prime Minister to judge it for himself.
And you will be handing over the unabridged version of this letter to the Prime Minister?
With names in that, which I haven't shared anywhere and don't intend sharing publicly.
The American who wrote the letter,
Yes,
is he still around?
Yes. No, come on.
Now I'm playing detective here.
No, don't interrogate me, Barkha. Don't.
But this is something you will put on the Prime Minister's table.
I will give it to him. I won't put it on his table. I'll give it to him in his hand.
And you have said in subsequent interviews that you believe that we are still being spied on.
Oh, I think that's the reality of life.
In fact, you suggest, sir, that while America expressed great surprise at Pokhran, you actually never bought that. You believe they knew all along.
Of course. They knew all along. It was part of the BJP's manifesto. In fact, this American says so in his letter, that look, the BJP has put it in its manifesto, etc., etc.